It was supposed to be just another night, quiet, ordinary, nothing out of place. But the way he looked at me, the way he couldn't hold back, it turned into the moment that changed everything I thought I knew about trust. I never thought I'd be telling the story. Even now, as I put these words together, I can feel the weight of shame pressing on my chest. But secrets have a way of eating you alive, and maybe telling it out loud is my only way of breathing again. That night started like any other. My husband was out late, caught up in work again. The house was quiet, too quiet. I made myself some tea, turned on the TV for background noise, and tried to ignore the loneliness that had become far too familiar. And then, the knock on the door. It wasn't unusual, not really. He had been around before, a familiar presence, someone I never thought twice about. But when I opened the door that night, there was something in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. He smiled, casual, as though nothing was different. But I felt it, the energy, the unspoken tension. It wrapped around the room the moment he stepped inside. I should have ended it there. I should have excused myself, closed the door, made it clear that this was not the night for company. But I didn't. Instead, I let him in. And as the door clicked shut behind us, I had no idea just how far things were about to go. Cliffhanger for part 2. It began with small talk, harmless words, but the way his eyes lingered told me this night wouldn't stay harmless for long. Sometimes it doesn't take words to cross a line. Sometimes it's just a look, a silence too heavy, a hand that lingers too long, and before you know it, you're standing on dangerous ground. We sat across from each other in the living room. The TV was still on, flickering images neither of us was paying attention to. He asked about my day, about life, about things that didn't matter, but his eyes said everything he wasn't saying. I laughed nervously, clutching my mug of tea like it was some kind of shield. But the warmth in my hands couldn't stop the chill racing down my spine every time his gaze lingered on me a second too long. He leaned back casually, but his words carried weight. "You always seem so alone here," he said softly. That sentence, it broke through walls I had been trying to hold up. Alone. He saw it. He named it. And suddenly I felt exposed. Vulnerable. I tried to brush it off with a smile, but the truth hung heavy between us. I was alone, more often than not. And the way he said it made me realize he had noticed long before tonight. The silence stretched. His hand rested on the arm of the couch, just inches from mine. I told myself to move, to stand up, to put distance between us. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there frozen waiting. And then it happened. His fingers brushed against mine. Just a touch, light, almost accidental, but I knew it wasn't. My breath caught in my throat. That single touch carried more danger than any words could. I pulled my hand back quickly, muttering something about the tea, about needing to grab a napkin. But when I stood and walked toward the kitchen, I could feel him behind me, following. And that's when I realized he wasn't going to hold back anymore. Not tonight. The kitchen light flickered above me, but it wasn't the bulb that made me tremble. It was the sound of his footsteps behind me, steady, certain, as though he had already decided what was going to happen next. I stood by the counter, pretending to fuss with the tea, pretending I needed something, anything, to keep my hands busy. My heart was racing so loud I was sure he could hear it. And then I felt him. He was close, too close, his presence filling the room like there wasn't enough air left for both of us. "You don't have to be so nervous," he said softly, his voice just above a whisper. I turned, forcing a laugh, trying to mask the trembling in my chest. But the moment our eyes met, I knew it was useless. His gaze was steady, burning, like he had been holding back for far too long. Before I could step away, his hand brushed against my arm, not accidental this time, not hesitant. Firm. Intentional. My breath caught. I should have said no, should have told him to leave, should have reminded myself, of everything that was at stake. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood frozen, caught in the gravity of something I knew I shouldn't want. He leaned closer, his voice low. "I've tried to ignore this, but I can't anymore." And in that moment, the distance between us disappeared. The warmth of his body against mine, the scent of his cologne, the unspoken hunger in the air, it all blurred into one truth I couldn't deny. That night wasn't going to end the way it should have. When his lips finally touched mine, I knew there was no going back, and that kiss became the point where everything began to unravel. It started with one kiss, soft at first, hesitant, but carrying every unspoken word we had been too afraid to say. And in that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The kiss should have ended quickly. A mistake, brushed off, forgotten. But instead, it deepened. He held me like he had been waiting for this moment far longer than I realized. My mind screamed at me to stop, to pull away, to remember everything I stood to lose. But my body betrayed me. I kissed him back. The sound of my heartbeat drowned out everything else. The TV in the other room, the hum of the refrigerator, even the voice in my head telling me this was wrong. All of it faded. His hands trembled slightly as they cupped my face, but his kiss was certain, like he had crossed this line in his heart long before tonight. When we finally pulled apart, I couldn't even look at him. My hands shook as I whispered, "This can't happen." But he only smiled, eyes dark with something I both feared and wanted. "It already has." Those words hit me harder than the kiss itself. Because he was right, the line had been crossed. There was no undoing it, no pretending it hadn't happened. The silence that followed was louder than any confession. I wanted to speak, to explain, to find reason, but there was none. He leaned in again, slower this time, giving me the chance to stop him. But I didn't. And when I let it happen again, when I kissed him back willingly, that was the moment I knew I was in deeper than I ever intended. That second kiss sealed it. We were no longer standing at the edge. We had fallen, and soon, everything in my life would begin to crumble because of it. The thrill of that night didn't fade, but neither did the guilt. And the more I tried to hide it, the more obvious it became, until the people closest to me started noticing. The next morning, I woke up with his scent still clinging to me, my lips still tingling from what had happened. For a fleeting moment, I let myself smile, and then the wave of guilt crashed in. I looked around my home at the pictures on the wall, at the life I had built with my husband. And the question hit me like a punch. What have I done? I told myself it was a mistake, a one-time weakness. But mistakes don't haunt you like this. His voice replayed in my head. His touch burned into my skin. And before long, one night became two. Two became three. And soon we had a secret. But secrets are heavy. And the heavier they get, the harder they are to hide. At dinner, my husband looked at me differently. His eyes lingered too long, searching, questioning. "You've been quiet lately," he said, trying to sound casual. I forced a smile, lied about being tired, about having too much on my mind. But I could feel his suspicion. And it wasn't just him. Friends began to notice too. One even asked, "Are you okay? You seem distracted." Distracted. That word cut deep, because it was true. I was distracted by a man I shouldn't have let into my heart, by a secret that was slowly eroding the life I once thought was unshakable. The lies piled up quickly. Deleted messages. Excuses that barely made sense. A sudden need to step outside just to take a call. Each one a brick in a wall I was building between me and my husband. And yet, despite the fear, I couldn't stop. Because every time I was with him, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. But what I didn't realize was that my husband wasn't the only one noticing the changes. Others were watching too. And soon, someone was going to say something I wasn't ready to hear. It only takes one moment, one slip, for a secret to become a scandal. And that moment was closer than I ever imagined. I thought I was careful. I thought no one would ever know. But secrets, they have a way of slipping through the cracks. And the first crack appeared when my husband looked me in the eyes and asked a question I wasn't ready for. It was late. I had just come back home, my hair still slightly tousled, my heart still racing from where I'd been. I tried to act normal, but the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. My husband was waiting in the living room. He didn't greet me with his usual warmth. Instead, he just stared, his face unreadable. "Where were you?" he asked, his tone calm but sharp, like a knife wrapped in silk. I froze. My mind scrambled for an excuse, something believable, something that would explain why I had been gone longer than I should have. I mumbled something about errands, about running into someone, about time getting away from me. But he didn't buy it. I could see it in his eyes. "You've been different lately," he continued. "Distracted. Distant. Is there something you're not telling me?" My chest tightened. This was the moment I had feared from the very beginning. And yet, instead of confessing, instead of telling the truth, I doubled down on the lies. I forced a laugh, brushed off his concern, leaned in to kiss him good night like nothing was wrong. But even as I did it, I felt his body stiffen beneath my touch. He wasn't convinced. He knew. The days that followed were worse. He grew quieter, more observant. He watched me with a careful eye, as if waiting for me to slip. And every time my phone buzzed, every time I stepped out of the room to take a call, I could feel his suspicion harden. And then it happened. One night, I left my phone on the counter, unlocked. He picked it up. I saw him glance at the screen, his face darkening as he read the words I hadn't deleted. When our eyes met, I knew there was no going back. The silence between us that night was louder than any fight could have been. Because in that silence, he already knew the truth. There are moments when silence hurts more than words. When someone doesn't have to accuse you because the truth is already written across your face. And that night, I couldn't hide it anymore. He held my phone in his hand, the screen still lit with the message I never should have left behind. Who is he? His voice was low, steady, but beneath it, I heard the storm. My throat went dry. I opened my mouth, but no words came. What excuse could possibly erase what he had just seen? Don't lie to me, he said, louder this time, his eyes burning into mine. I deserve the truth. I stammered, searching for something, anything, but every excuse sounded hollow, pathetic. Finally, I whispered, "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." The moment the words left my mouth, his face twisted in pain. "Didn't mean anything," he repeated, his voice breaking. "You shattered our marriage, our life, for something that didn't mean anything." Tears burned my eyes. I tried to reach for him, to explain, to soften the blow, but he pulled away like my touch itself was poison. The anger came next. His voice rose, sharp and raw. He accused, demanded, pleaded all in the same breath. How long? How could you? Was it worth it? Every word was a dagger, but I had no shield, no defense, because deep down I knew he was right. I sobbed, begged for forgiveness, swore it would never happen again. But my tears only seemed to harden him. "Do you even realize what you've done?" he asked finally, quieter now, his voice heavy with grief. "You didn't just betray me, you betrayed us. Everything we built, everything we were." And in that moment, I saw it in his eyes, something far worse than anger. Disappointment, the kind that told me I had lost something I could never get back.